Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. It's time to have a look at Britain when it comes to the GE sales and what is available. There is a ton of different vehicles that are in the aviation tree, at least for Britain, which are GE. Pretty much this whole line here, bar a few of them, are all GE vehicles, and this seems like a common trend nowadays. There don't seem to be that many packed vehicles now. A lot of them are GE, especially like the mid-tier ones. So that seems to be the way that they're going. For the general game. You obviously have Tux Gladiator, which I don't even know if it's available anymore, but that's there. There's no point in buying that. The We're Away is a little bit of fun, so you know you get actually quite a good bomb load with the We're Away with the two 250s and also two 500s on it, which is quite nice. So that can actually be quite useful at 1.3. You also have two 7.7 Vickers and a 7.7 Vickers turret as well, just to have a bit of fun with it. And then I would say I suppose if you're running like some low tier ground lineups or naval lineups, it's actually not that bad to pick up, so you could run it with it. It's also Australian, so you know, a bit of representation never hurt anybody. Then you have Hudson Mark V. We talked about this the other day. I wish its bomb loads were better. I think its bomb loads are pretty poor compared to a lot of other vehicles around these BRs. So for me, it's a no, even though it's kind of cool and it does maneuver pretty well and does have some offensive guns, defensive guns, offensive bombs, and also rockets. It's just usually not good enough in any area to justify. Then you have the Avenger. It's kind of the same way. It does actually get Uncle Tom, surprisingly. So if you need to do that Battle Pass challenge, it's not a bad idea. And also gets itself a torpedo that you can use in Naval. But once again, it's just one of those vehicles that doesn't have enough of a bomb load to be useful in the game. And the bombs aren't big enough to be useful either. There are just better options. Which is why this thing went down in BR a bunch of times, and even now it's still not in the best place. Then you got the Venture. The Venture is very good. It's just a standard Mark IIA. It's also available in the starter pack, so just buy the starter pack and you'll get a much better deal. They also usually put those 50% off. When they're 50% off, they're always worth picking up just because of what you get in them. It gives you very good value for your money. But the Venture is just a Mark IIA. You know, ton of guns, ton of rounds, very good defensively flying, and also very good rate of climb. Only thing you got to watch out for is overheating the engine, which you can deal with. It's not too much of an issue. Corsair F Mark II, standard Corsair at 2.7, which is very powerful. You know, the 650 cal combo, plus, of course, the engine or the engine power of the Corsair F Mark II can be really good for the vehicle. So this actually is under BR'd, just like a lot of the Corsairs. They are very much undervalued, and I don't know why. They all work really well, and this one is no exception. Corsair F Mark II is very good at what it does. Then you've also got the Hellcat Mark II, another American plane that's very good at what it does, especially if you're playing naval, because you can have the torpedo. You also have the two 1,000 pounders. This one is a gem in naval, alongside the American one, which turns up as well. Has the 50 cals, got nerfed a bunch of years ago now, so it isn't as maneuverable as it used to be, but it's still fine. It also has two camouflages, so you got the standard one, and then you got the 18th one, which are very similar to each other, but slight differences in the insignias. Then, the Thunderbolt Mark I. It's a Razorback Thunderbolt, so it has all of the standard stuff of Razorback Thunderbolts. You know, it's got the bombs, the two 1000s, the 1500, beautiful for CAS, for ground, and also naval, and also all of the 50 cals. So this vehicle will do well in pretty much any scenario. And once again, it's got two camos. You know, it's got the one with the white rose, which is really cool, from, I believe, Yorkshire. And then also you have the Skull of Hearts, or the Ace of Hearts, whatever it is. But yeah, the Thunderbolt is the same as all the other P-47s in the game. It's powerful, it works well, it's good. You know, I don't know how many times I could say the same things about Thunderbolts. The Mustang is slightly different though. It has a ton of skins attached to it because it's one of the oldest planes in the game for a premium. It used to actually be a pack vehicle, and nowadays it's a GE vehicle. So it has a ton of these camos, and they're all really cool. And you just have to kind of, unlock them as you go. If you're really into camo hunting, this is definitely the one to go for. You can have a really good time in it and enjoy yourself, which is good. And it's got very good mid-altitude performance, very good low-altitude performance. It has pretty poor high-altitude performance, though. And the Hispanos, I've never had an issue with the Mark IIs, personally, but a lot of people do talk about having issues with them not doing as much damage or not being as accurate as people want. One of the things I would say is nowadays the 20mm Hispanos are really good in ground forces because there's a lot of vehicles which you can top down with them and do a lot of damage if you penetrate. So for me, the Mustang is good for ground, and it's also good for air, just not so good in naval like a few other machines. You've got the MB5, the good old Martin Baker. This one is super interesting. I think it looks really cool. It's also once again got a skin somehow. But the vehicle itself is really nice in the way that it looks. It's just not very useful. It has the chronic problem that plagues a lot of War Thunder vehicles. It doesn't climb well enough, and also on top of that, it doesn't turn well enough. So even though it has the 420mm, they're actually quite spread out on the wings, so convergence can be an issue. It's got this big hunk of junk contra prop with the Griffin 83 engine, which gives it a lot of power, but it can't really do a lot with it. There's a reason why you don't really see many of these about, and it's because of the lack of climb rates, because of the lack of turn time, and it just can't get into position and do damage. Usually it's just too late to the party. Then you have the Hornet, which has the opposite setup, so it gets an air spawn. It's very good. Or it used to get an air spawn. I don't know if it still does or not, but even if it doesn't get an air spawn, it has a hell of a climb rate, so it can massively increase its altitude, and it can go bomber hunting or strike aircraft hunting or whatever hunting, really. The thing that's nice about the Hornet is these engines. It uses the Merlin 130s, which give it a lot of power, and you're able to get into good positions pretty quickly and deal with a lot of other fighters. Also, it has 420mm, which is really nice. They're the Mark Vs as well, and they gave this one the two 1,000 pounders alongside a bunch of rockets as well if you want to bring them. So it can be useful in ground and also naval too. Probably not really in naval though, since at that point you're at a pretty high BR and it's not going to work too well. So definitely more ground/aviation orientated. Then you also have the Spitfire F Mark 14C. This one has the 7.7mm guns alongside the 20mm cannons, the Hispano Mark IIs. So the Griffin Spits are all really good, especially the 5.7 ones. My favorite Griffin Spit in the game is the Mark 14E, and then also you've got the Mark 18, which is super fun to play. Both of these are the same BR as this, the main difference being the armament between them. Both the armaments are fine. The 50 cals are much better than the 7.7s though, just because of speed, and also just because of you're doing a bit more damage with them. This one still can work very well, and also has a 500-pound bomb, so you can use it in ground and also dogfight with it if you want. The Griffin Spits are a perfect balance between energy fighting and also turn fighting. They feel super fun to play, and I would highly recommend giving them a go if you've never actually used them. Then the Attacker FB2. This is just the standard attacker with a slightly different tail on it. I can't remember if this one's longer or shorter, but it's something like that. Maybe it's something to do with the rudder. Could be that as well. The attacker is a dodgy jet. It doesn't have a ton of power behind it. The guns are really nice, but you have to worry about convergence again. So if you're a person who struggles with that, then that's going to be an issue. If you're not, you're going to hit people like a truck, which is what, for me, I find in the attacker. The other thing is two 1,000-pound bombs again. So really good in ground forces. The problem is it's exactly the same as the standard attacker, so you could just grind out the standard attacker and have the same setup on it. So if you are looking for a vehicle to kind of grind out the tech tree, the Attacker FP2 is not bad, but there are better options like the Spitfire, for example, which you'll have a lot better time with. Then you got the Reaper. The Reaper is just a fat meteor which can carry more bombs. This thing, it can carry 4-1000, so it can kill some bases and maybe be useful in ground forces, but it's a chunky meteor at a BR where meteors get eaten alive. The lower tier meteors at 7.7 and 7.3 are super fun. Some of the best vehicles to play in the game because they're very maneuverable. But as you go up against things which have way more speed and way more acceleration, and then you get eaten alive. And that's where the Reaper is, alongside the other two Mark 8s and also Mark 4 here, which makes it not too fun. Then you've also got the Sea Vixen. So this one is a little bit different compared to other vehicles because it doesn't have any guns. It only has access to missiles, and the missiles it get access to is the red tops and also the fire streaks. You do get access to bullpups as well if you want to use them, and also you get access to RP3s, APs, and of course standard rockets and bombs too. So the vehicle itself, like if you really want to, you could actually bring along like something like this, which is just a crazy setup. You do have access to secondary stuff if you want, like secondary weapon setups, so you can create things if you want, and that means that it can be useful a little bit more than maybe you are used to. And for me, the Sea Vixen is a lot of fun because it gives a different playstyle to many others. You go fast, you try and set up kills from afar, you try and create 2-on-1s with allies, you wait for people to go slow, and then you launch missiles at them, and it works pretty fun. Like it's a cool, also unique design as well. I think overall it looks quite nice. So it's really cool to see it in game, and hopefully people will enjoy it. Then you've got the Harrier GR1. This is the last one of the G1s. This one's in a pretty rough position right now. It's in a better position since they lowered its BR, but the main issue with it is the same problem that a lot of 9.7s, 10.0s, and 10.3s have, and that's countermeasures. The GR1 does not have countermeasures, so if you have somebody who has pretty powerful missiles, which there are a lot around this BR, which have stuff like Magics, have stuff like R60s, have even stuff like AIM-9Ls, you're going to get eaten alive, and that's what happens with the Harrier GR1. So it's in a better position than it was a few months ago. Still in a terrible position though. It just doesn't work well, and I would probably advise against this one just because you just can't defend yourself. The Harrier platform is not one which is good for defensive stuff unless you really slow the enemy down, and then you can go into VTOL. What it's good for is being on the attack and being in the ascendancy, which the GR1 does pretty well, but since you can't control that all the time, it's definitely not the one to go for the British tech tree. The G-Lynx is on offer for Britain, and I would actually say it's not a bad pickup. The only thing that may be bad about it is the fact that the Royvalk may also go on sale, so that's only something you can find out in a week's time, and obviously it'll be passed by then. When it comes to the Scout and the Wasp, they seem pretty decent missile platforms. They have the AS-11s, which are quite good, and then also you have the Lynx, which seems okay, and then you've got the Apache. So the British tech tree for helicopters isn't huge, but the G-Lynx is one of those which is fast, it's maneuverable, it's able to move around pretty quickly, and also has access to all the things you would want from a vehicle like this. It's got thermals, it's got good old Hellfires attached, and it also has access to Stingers. So it's got pretty much everything like you would want from a 10.0 vehicle. It can't carry as many as other vehicles, but it can definitely, push forward and do good damage with it. I've always thought the G-Lynx was quite a nice little thing to run around in. Obviously not as powerful as some of the higher ones, but at 10.0 is not a bad pickup, because nowadays at 10.0 you got a pretty decent lineup after the BR decompression stuff, the Challenger Mark II and also the TTD. You could even run it at 10.3 as well with the Vickers, the Challenger, the Stormer as well, enjoying it. So why not give it a go at the end of the day? For the ground vehicles portion, there isn't as many premium vehicles, but there's still a decent amount. Starting off with obviously the A13, which is just a copy of the Mark 1, which has access to a different camo. This one is fine. You can actually take off a bunch of the decals which were put on before because they've actually input them into the camouflage now. So you can see here that if you've had this for a while, you can actually put on some extra decorations, which is pretty cool. The vehicle itself has the 40mm, which is a good one. It has access to the stabilizer on the gun, so you can usually get the first shot off. It has good mobility, decent rotation speed on the gun, and also a good AP shell, which can go through pretty much anything. So the A13 is a good one. It works very well, and I would say that if you are looking for a starter vehicle, it's not a bad one to go for, especially since it's pretty cheap. The Independent is not very good. I think it's better than the Rogue Go, but I'm pretty sure it's worse than all of the other mammoth machines that we have at the low tiers. It has this weird 47mm gun, the Ordnance QF3 Pounder, which has access to 49mm of pen, which is why it's 1.3. It's also a massive land ship. It's absolutely huge from the 1920s, and it used to be the oldest vehicle in War Thunder for ground. No longer is, though, so it's a little bit boring. It used to at least have that accolade, but then obviously the FCM turned up, so it's just another fat vehicle now. Its armor is bad. Pretty much everything about it is not great, but it's a bit of history. I just wish these vehicles were a little bit less expensive compared to what they are. Crusader of the Saints, very good. It's just a standard Crusader where they've put the Saint tab on it and a few decals. This is part of the starter pack, so wait for the starter pack to go on sale and pick it up. It's got, once again, stabilizer on the 40, which is really nice. Scouting, tons of smoke grenades, so you can reposition really well. And also at the same time, it has access to artillery and all of that good stuff. So overall, a very powerful vehicle. If you've played the Crusaders, you know how good it is. Then you got the Cromwell RP3. It's a bit expensive for basically just four rockets on it. That's all you get. This is not like a Calliope level or an M26 level where you have a bunch of rockets. This one you just have 4 RP3s and that's it. So it's definitely not one which I would say is worth it. The simple fact is you already have a really good lineup around the Cromwells, with the 2 Cromwells and the Sherman 2. So you don't need another Cromwell for that lineup, I feel like. And at the same time, it's a gimmick which is way too expensive. Then you've got a Trizniak, which is, of course, the Sherman 1C. This is a Polish one. The 4.7 is actually a pretty strong lineup for Britain nowadays. You got the Mark 7, you got the Istavag that you can bring in, and of course the standard Sherman Firefly, the Concept 3, which should be higher BR, and obviously the Avenger that sits there as well. So the Trizniak can be a replacement for the standard Firefly, or you could bring it alongside of it, and I think it would do pretty well. There's no issues with the vehicle. The 17-pounder works well. The Mark 8 is a very good penetrating round. The only issue I have with this specifically actually is the gun being a little bit wobbly and also not the best gun depression compared to a lot of other vehicles, but you can work on that, especially since it's a Sherman chassis and it does everything else but good. The AC4 is a dodgy one. It's once again another 17-pounder. Doesn't get access to APDS, which is why it's at 5.3. The vehicle is fine. It's a little bit fun since it's another Australian vehicle, which is nice, and also people kind of get confused by it because they don't usually see stuff like this. So I think it's a fine vehicle to have. No reverse, unfortunately, just like a lot of the British vehicles at this BR, and also at the same time, not great armor, but a lot of dodgy angles on the armor which can bounce shells that it has no right to do so, which is good. Centurion Action X is fantastic. It's just a standard Centurion with a slightly different turret, has the 84mm or the 20-pounder, good stabilization on the gun, good APDS, you know, good gun depression, decent turrets in that it can take some hits from at least some rounds, and also okay reload. And being on the Centurion chassis, it's not the fastest, but it's reliable, and also does have reverse, which is not like a lot of the other British stuff. So for me, it's a completely good vehicle, works really well. Would definitely say it's worth giving a go at, especially after the APDS change that they brought in. So if you need something to bolster that already pretty powerful 7-3 combo with these two vehicles, why not bring in the Centurion Action X to grind stuff out? You also have the Khalid, but the Khalid is not on sale because, of course, it is not. It came out in the last few updates, so you'll have to wait for a few months for that to go on sale. For the naval side, for Britain, there are some pretty decent ships, but I would actually say there's some much better ones on the Gaijin market. The Garland right now, a rank 2 machine, is still, I think, below $10 on the Gaijin market, so it might even be like $1 or $2. Always worth picking up when it comes to the vehicle. It's not a bad one. It's pretty similar to the Grafton. It's just slightly worse, but you know, it's a steal for getting started into the British tech tree. You've also got the Valhalla and also the Verdun. The Verdun is just a V-class. This one's also a V-class, but they're slightly different with their setups. This vehicle has 4 single 4-inch guns, where the Verdun has 2 sets of dual 4-inch guns, and then they mirror the Vega, which is much similar to the Verdun. The Valhalla is kind of an oddity in its setup. I don't know why you would pick this up since it's at 3.3. All of the other vehicles are at 3.7. You'd have to run it as a solo, which obviously won't be very good. But yeah, it doesn't have any AA on it. It doesn't really have anything apart from these 4 4-inch guns, which is nice, but I mean, why not just use the Verdun and the Vega at that point? The Jervis is at 4.3 with a lot of other vehicles for the British, and it has the 4.7-inch guns on it, which are fantastic. It has 2 sets on the front, 1 set over here, and a bunch of 40mm and a quad stack, and also a bunch of 20mm and torpedoes. There's so many different 4.3 machines for the British, it's kind of ridiculous. You have the Kelvin, the Nepal, the Eskimo, and of course the Jervis. 4.7 is also nuts, with the Armada, the Tobruk, the Cadiz, the Mohawk, and the Diana as well sat here. So you're really spoiled for choice for vehicles like this Jervis. So if you want to, I suppose, run it with a lineup, it can work really well. But once again, once you have the lineup of the Kelvin and the Nepal, and also the Eskimo, which is the tribal class, it's going to be really hard to actually put in the Jervis, because it's not really better than any of them. It's pretty much the same, if not slightly worse, because you don't get the bonuses from, you know, modifying the vehicles, and then by that point you're on to 4.7, so you want to run something else. So it's a good starter vehicle, but I would rather take the Garland personally. Is probably the best way of putting it. The Belfast is the other one that's available for Blue Water. This one is kind of the staple for the British naval tech tree. It's the one that people go to when they want to grind out Blue Water. Has access to 4 triple mounted 6-inch guns, 4 dual mounted 4-inch guns as well, and also 6 dual mounted 40s. So good AA support and also good 6-inch guns. It just has a ton of them. If this thing gets left alone, it could just hammer down and go crazy, which is pretty fun. So not a bad vehicle, not as good as some of the 6.0 monsters, but it does mean it stays out of that 7.0 matchmaking, which is super useful for the vehicle. So overall, a pretty nice one. The MTB is useless. It's the same as the other MTB. These ones are cursed with the 7.72mm Lewis guns, these quad setups that you see here, which do probably the least amount of damage out of any gun in the game, which is just incredibly sad. And also it has access to torpedoes, which come out the back, which do okay, but once again, they're not the best. Then you got the MGB 75. This one always goes on sale, and I always say don't buy it because it has no survivability and also very weak armament. 140mm and also a dual 20 on the back and some Lewis machine guns once again, which won't do any damage. You're really not, you know, at the height of usefulness in this machine. The gun as well has not a huge magazine in it that you have to change pretty often. It's not like the standard like Orlican that you may be used to, which you can just keep firing over and over again. Instead, you have to wait on the reload for this one, which makes it pretty poor. So I won't bother with this. I just grind through the general tech tree and play a bunch of the different vehicles and have a bit of fun. The higher tier ones, the Orla, which is very similar to the Peacock. It is a Peacock class or whatever. I don't like this once again. It's huge and it just has a 76mm. So massive target for destroyers, massive target for pretty much anything else that exists, and you have to rely on this one front gun and hope that it doesn't get knocked out and hope that you can survive. That to me is not a recipe for success. So it can probably get a few shots off and, you know, do something, but at the end of the day it's going to get annihilated, which isn't really fun. The gun itself as well, the 76mm, doesn't one-shot vehicles that often, so that can be a problem too when being in those coastal battles. And then you got the Whitby, which is a frigate, so it'll get a destroyer spawn, and it has two dual-mounted 4.5-inch guns. It also has two dual 40mm guns and this weird mortar on the back, which is pretty useless. So you're basically relying on two 4.5-inch sets of turrets. They're good guns, you know. They're two 4.5-inch guns. So you don't get two sets of turrets. You only get one, and then you get obviously the 40 on the back. And the 4.5s are good. Like, they have a good reload rate, and they can put out damage pretty effectively. And also at the same time, they get AP and they get HE, which is nice. But you're coming up against things which have 3 or 4 or maybe even 5 times the amount of firepower that you have, and it's like, well, why am I here? You know, why am I doing this? And why am I not just playing Blue Water and playing stuff like, you know, even the starter EVGA, which has, you know, double the amount of firepower of you, even if it isn't as fast reload. But if you go up to something like the Eskimo or even the Calp, they have way more firepower than what you're bringing. So it kind of sucks at the end of the day for the good old Whitby. If they maybe introduced a different spawn, maybe it would work for it, but unfortunately they haven't. As always, I hope you have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time. I'd just like to thank Millie Draper, Juan the Panda, Nick R. Kupila, Carrion Crow, Gus Irenicus, Pyman, Merciless Reaper, Orange Tail, Teddy, Daniel Stanton, Moxie B. Young, Peter Grayling, Jerry Provolt, Bareen, Alan Hacker, Sem Arslan, Uncle Bean, Derek R., and Lafouche for supporting the channel.